issues and somewhat neutral on religious matters, but it is probably more accurate to say that the Congress's true philosophy is to just run the government as best as they can, in tune with the general instincts of their elite leadership class. But anyway, as the many decades of rule by the Congress Party continued to go on, there was sort of a gradually emerging consensus among many Indians that the party was starting to devolve. I like this quote here. Congress was transformed from a well-organized but decentralized party machine into a collection of sycophantic functionaries whose chief task was to perpetuate the rule of the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty. During the 1990s, Congress entered a phase of unpopularity and weakness from which it has never fully recovered, and this fact wound up fundamentally changing Indian politics. Voters began to turn away from Congress for a variety of different reasons. Some thought the party had just not made enough progress solving India's major problems. Others, as I said, thought it was becoming too corrupt, elitist, and authoritarian. And then there was this whole growing backlash among Hindu Indians in particular, who saw the Congress as being too pro-Muslim. But in any case, by the 1990s, India had become something closer to a competitive two-party system, in which Congress was increasingly challenged by a strong rival party known as the BJP. So BJP stands for Bharatiya Janata Party, which is usually translated to mean something like Indian People's Party. Now, the BJP is often called a Hindu nationalist party, and that is certainly where it got its start. India is 80% Hindu, and from the earliest days of Indian independence, there was always this large faction of people who believed that India should be a country built in the image of its Hindu majority. This meant pushing the Hindi language, enshrining Hindu religious principles into law, and standing strong against the enemies of Hinduism, both abroad and, more controversially, at home. Now, India is a gigantic country of over 1 billion people, 4 times as large as the United States. And even though it may be 80% Hindu, it is still one of the most diverse countries in the entire world, full of all sorts of different overlapping and conflicting linguistic, cultural, and ethnic identities spread across one of the largest geographic territories on Earth. And of course, they have this whole elaborate caste system too, which only subdivides people up even further. The real hardcore political Hindus have always been high caste people in this part of the country, charmingly known as the Cow Belt. And as is always the case with any political movement based around religion, there has always been plenty of religious fanaticism in the Hindu nationalist set, including crazy fundamentalist hatred of anything non-Hindu in India, like the English language or the Taj Mahal, as well as outright terroristic violence against Indians of non-Hindu religions. Initially, the BJP and its predecessor parties were considered too close to this whole scene to win a national election in India. But over the years, the party has moderated in some important ways. It's placed a greater emphasis on economic issues, capitalized on growing frustrations with Congress, proven its competence at governing at the state level, and risen dramatically as a viable political option as a result. The man who perhaps best embodies this story is Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister of India and the most successful BJP politician in the country's history. Modi was a cowbelt politician who, in the 1990s, served in India's first ever BJP state government, right here in the province of Gujarat. In 2001, he became Prime Minister of the state and one of the highest profile BJP politicians in the country. The reason why non-Indian journalists tend to be so fascinated with Modi is because he kind of embodies everything that people both like and hate about the rise of modern Hindu nationalist politics in India. On the one hand, he is considered pretty cozy with the extremist set. He was involved in hardcore Hindu groups when he was a young man, and during his time in the government of Gujarat, he was accused of being personally complicit in some of the Hindu on Muslim violence that consumed that state in the early 2000s. The degree you consider Modi personally responsible for that violence, which left over 1,000 Muslims dead, is one of the great polarizing issues in modern India. But on the other hand, Modi has also exerted a lot of effort to define his political brand around economic competence and anti-corruption as much as anything else. When he was running Gujarat, the province experienced a lot of economic growth and improved delivery of public services. They called it the miracle of Modinomics. And by they, I of course mean Modi. In 2013, Modi was made head of the national BJP, and in 2014, he was elected prime minister in a big landslide, completely crushing Congress. That election was a big deal because it seemed to very clearly herald the start of a new age of politics for India. The Congress party Modi defeated was led by Rahul Gandhi, who was not really considered one of the most impressive members of the Gandhi family. The Modi people mocked him mercilessly, portraying him as a spoiled, rich moron completely out of touch with ordinary Indians. A product of the corrupt ruling class, and of course not nearly Hindu enough, and way too close with the Muslims. And that argument clearly worked, as you can see from this election map. Anyway, now it is 2019, and the two men are back for a rematch. From what I can tell, most people still expect Modi to win, but think it will be a bit closer than last time. Modi is still a broadly more popular guy than Gandhi, but you know, he's also been running the government for the last 5 years, which makes him accountable for a number of decisions that he's made. Is India richer, safer, healthier, freer, stronger, less corrupt, less divided? I have no clue, but any Indians watching this can feel free to argue about it in the comments. Obviously, a lot of Indians would say no to at least some of those questions. Now, India has a lot of other political parties beyond just Congress and the BJP. There are currently 35 different political parties in the Indian parliament, in fact, representing a combined total of over 100 seats, although most of these parties only have like 1 or 2 seats each. What this means is that if neither Congress nor the BJP can win a majority of seats in the parliament, they will have to form a coalition with some of the smaller parties in order to rule. This is what happened for a 25-year period between 1989 and 2014. Neither of the two big parties was able to win a majority of seats, and as a result, India entered this long period of perpetual coalition governments. This is another reason why Modi is considered a big deal. His big landslide victory put an end to this trend. Of the smaller parties that regularly win 10 or more seats, most are regional parties that only exist within the borders of a particular state. Here, I should note that India elects its parliament using a geographic system, like Britain or America, and not a proportional representation list system, like some parts of Europe. India's regional parties tend to be controlled by particular families who are very dominant in the politics of that state, and thus, in order to ensure that they maintain as much political control of that state as possible, they run in national elections too. If we overlay this map of the 2014 Indian election with a map of India's states, you can see how all of the strongest pockets of minor party support are all very concentrated in certain areas. So this state has its own party, and so does this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. As you might expect, the states that have their own parties also tend to be the states that have some sort of strong religious or ethnic or linguistic identity that makes them feel alienated from the Main Street cowbelt parties in some way. So this state is where all the ethnic Tamils live, and this state is where the Telugu-speaking people live, and so on. We can all just pretend that we know who these people are. But in any case, a lot of this winds up being fairly irrelevant because most of the small parties have grouped themselves into two broad alliances. The National Democratic Alliance, which is allied with the BJP, and the United Progressive Alliance, which is allied with Congress. This means the business of making a coalition government in India isn't actually that complicated, since it is quite obvious who is going to ally with who. Alrighty, now let us talk about some Indian election fun facts. Fun fact number 1. India is so gigantic, it would be logistically impossible for them to run their whole election in only one day, like most countries. So instead, different parts of India vote on 7 different days over the course of a month. So I guess all the Indians that voted back in April better hope that nothing happens in the next couple of weeks to make them second guess their decision. Fun fact number 2. Indians vote using these extremely weird looking ballot machines that look like something out of a 1970s hospital. You just press a button and the contraption prints and stores a paper ballot for the election people to count later. The Indian election people say this is the most brilliant and foolproof machine that man has ever invented, and so sexy too. Fun fact number 3. Because so many Indians cannot read or write, it has been long-standing tradition in India for the political parties to have clear, simplistic logos that illiterate people can easily identify on the voting contraptions. So the Congress has this hand, and the BJP has this flower thing, and the communists have the hammer and sickle. So far, so good. But at some point, the Indian Election Commission decided that the political parties could not be trusted to pick their own logos anymore. So when you apply to be a new political party in India today, the Indian election people make you pick a logo from this list